I'd been feeling the veil of anxiety billowing somewhat ominously over me for about half a year. It wasn't debilitating or problematic in a practical sense, nor was it entirely alien to me, but it was the first time I was going to do psychedelics not completely joyous over the prospect. Nonetheless, I was confident that I would have a good trip, due in large part to experience with mushrooms and other psychedelic substances, but also because of the setting I was in and the friend I'd be tripping with. I've enjoyed all of my psychedelic experiences with a close group of friends. While some have rotated in and out, Adam has been there for every trip I've ever done. This would be the lowest dose either of us had ever taken, and there was a niggling feeling that the experience might prove underwhelming, though less so for me because of the mindset I was in. Despite this minor concern, we sandwiched our shrooms between some chips and cast our shroom boat out to the cosmic ocean. I always find the come up on shrooms a bizarre feeling. The closest analogy I can think of is the ineffable perception of autumn on the way. I find the way one can smell the impending change in season, much like the way one can feel the impending change in consciousness. A change in internal season is appropriate language, I think. Beyond sensing that the shrooms have begun their work, the first feelings that begin to swell are similar to an MDMA experience. The pervasive feeling that everything in the world, or at least the small corner I was inhabiting, is well. Everything is intrinsically good. I perceived the gentle rocking of the paddleboat to be in harmony with the sway of the water. At this point, any and all anxiety I had felt before the trip was safely banished, never to appear again. Conversation tends to be more vibrant when there's more than two of us. But for whatever reason, when the two of us trip together, we tend to float off into our own world, returning to each other's attention far less often than with 3 or 4 of us around. This trip was much the same. We'd acknowledge one another, or attempt to communicate, mostly when we were making shockingly inept stabs at steering our increasingly insubordinate paddleboat. I hadn't really considered that I might not want to paddle incessantly while on shrooms. Adam shared the sentiment, and we eventually made our way to a shore of the lake, where we were quite content to let the current take us where it would. At this point, I was peaking and soaking in the beauty on display. Due to the low dose, the psychedelic attributes that I was used to feeling were not so much evident on this trip. What was evident in abundance, however, was the overwhelming beauty of the trees on the shore. I was enamored with the interplay of the sunlight as it wove through the leaves. There was also a unique timelessness I felt about this scene in particular. Such was the goodness and radiant beauty of this moment in nature. I thought it not right for time to carry on and to leave this moment open to being anything other than it is. I hoped it would remain is and never surrender to was. It was nostalgia for a moment that hadn't yet ended, but that I knew eventually would. The direct experience of this awareness of the transience of time was perfect in its immediacy. Any attempt to approach describing this feeling, either to myself or to others, only magnifies the deficiencies of language. This feeling lasted for the rest of the shore. The water near the shore was pretty weedy, and we found ourselves immobilized on a number of occasions. The time it took us to notice we weren't drifting anymore often wandered into hilarity, with one of us eventually noting, "We don't seem to be moving." After confirming suspicions, we begrudgingly attempt to paddle around or through the weeds so that the current might engage us again. I think there was one point where we were both pretty happy to remain stationary. Such was the loveliness of the particular spot in which we were stuck. It was in one of those moments where I closed my eyes and tilted my head back. The overwhelming characteristic of my visuals was an ostensibly empty space that was infused with an incredible golden hue. It invoked pastoral, dreamish landscapes of rolling hills drenched in the warmest tones. As the peak subsided, we both became a little more talkative. It felt similar to a dense fog dispersing, wherein the closer you move towards an object, the clearer it becomes. In this case, the object was speech, and the fog was the peak of the trip. It was also around this point we realized we'd been baking in direct sunlight for 3 or 4 hours and decided that it might be in our best interest to begin the long paddle back to the cottage. The come down was uneventful. We both had naps. While this trip was neither groundbreaking nor filled with the fireworks that previous trips had produced, it was the most peaceful trip I've had and one of the most enjoyable.